Did Unfiltered Lucky pull out a detail that law enforcement tried to bury? 4 passed, 1 to the hospital. Is that a survivor? Could that potentially be a witness?
Let's get up our new subject. The subject that I've been the most fascinated to talk to you guys about lately is this concept that I've heard on Unfiltered Lucky and on Haynes channel, where they're talking about a 5th victim, and it's fascinating. I have a lot. So I haven't actually heard Lucky's, but I pulled up the video. So we'll be hearing this for the first time together, but I have listened to AR's because obviously I'm a fan of AR. So here we go. We'll listen to this together for the first time.
Law enforcement already stated that they have an informant. Steve Gonsalves allegedly found this informant, and law enforcement stepped in and told Steve Gonsalves to stay away. So how crucial is this informant to the Idaho 4 case? Hey everyone, it's Lucky with Unfiltered Lucky. And today I want to talk a little bit about why we might think that there's an informant in this case. Now, a lot of us have believed from the very beginning that law enforcement had an informant that led them to Bryan Kohberger. In these leaked messages that were just released between Steve Gonsalves and a content creator, Steve Gonsalves mentions this informant. He claims that law enforcement was on to Bryan Kohberger because of this informant. Now, I can't confirm the source of these messages, so I'm going to say that they're not confirmed, but it's definitely something to think about. Many of us have felt that there was an informant in this case, or even possibly a co-defendant. And then Steve Gonsalves mentions an informant in his messages. So that's quite the coincidence. And one of the reasons that I've always believed that is because I feel like law enforcement had an indication the very first day that these crimes occurred. They issued an alert at 1 p.m., just 1 hour after 911 was called about these crimes. And that alert basically was informing the people on campus kind of a little bit about what was going on. Now, at just after 3 o'clock p.m., so 3 hours after 911 was called, the University of Idaho issues a shelter in place. So basically telling everybody on campus, stay inside. There's a dangerous situation happening in this area. But only 30 minutes later, the University of Idaho lifts that shelter in place and basically tells everybody on campus that they're free to move around. Just keep your eyes open. So that's kind of strange. Why lift the shelter in place only 3.5 hours after 911 was called when there's no suspect or no person of interest? Law enforcement didn't really know anything about what was going on because it had only been 3 hours since they arrived at the scene. Now, investigators are on scene, and Moscow Police Department has called out for help from state and federal agencies. They have a suspect. They have someone in custody. Some would say that Chief Fry is a public figure, but I can definitely say that if there's a homicidal maniac, or the possibility that there might be a homicidal maniac in my neighborhood, and law enforcement tells me that there's no danger in this community, but they don't have a suspect or have anybody in custody, then I'm going to have some questions back, or they have someone in custody. How does law enforcement know?
Or the other option, I hate to like interject myself, but what about if there was something left on the scene, like writing on the wall or somebody, trigger warning, leaving something in writing before they passed on? So
Where the person or people who committed this crime are at, unless they have eyes on them? How do they know that this person is not still in the community? How do they know that this is the only house, or that these are the only victims that this person or people who committed these crimes are targeting? It's very possible that this person may have more targets who were not in the house that night. So it seems strange that law enforcement would lead the public to believe that they were safe.
I'm going to pull up AR's. Yeah. Because, like I said, this is my first time watching it, and I don't know where to skip forward to, but I know AR puts a lot of focus on it because I did watch AR's video. So let me just pull that.
Okay. Yeah.
But yeah, great theory. I think everybody gives credit to Unfiltered Lucky for bringing this into the forefront for a subject for us.
AR has some real neat introductions.
Love it. Yeah, this is what I love it.
Yeah.
Take this banner down.
Could you imagine being the witness of a quadruple homicide right in the middle of college town, Moscow, Idaho, that has now exploded to be one of the largest, most followed cases in years? Now, as that witness, were you actually in the home as the crime was being committed? Are you a survivor? And who could that witness potentially be? And what details does that witness given? And it kind of makes sense now that I think about it, because I have to give credit right away, even before we jump into this, to Unfiltered Lucky, with his due diligence very early on, getting in touch with a news reporter regarding a statement that she made. And Unfiltered Lucky confronted that head on. He got a very important answer. M.A.R. Haynes, this is Convict's Thoughts. Did Unfiltered Lucky pull out a detail that law enforcement tried to bury? 4 passed, 1 to the hospital. Is that a survivor? Could that potentially be a witness? And if there is a survivor, how is Dylan Mortensen, especially Dylan Mortensen, but maybe even possibly Bethany, not in jail? You really have to think about that now. There was an 8-hour delay between what they're estimating was the time of the crime and when that phone call finally was made to 911. Was the potential surviving witness, or whoever that might be, that was reported very early and never spoken of again, confirmed by Unfiltered Lucky's connection to the very newscaster that publicized it? The person that was taken to the hospital, were they surviving for 8 hours and no phone call was made? Were they just clearly visible within the home to any roommate that potentially they came out of their room and ignored? Were their whimpers for help possibly ignored? This is not all fact, ladies and gentlemen. This is thoughts. This is opinions. This is based off of how I'm kind of feeling in regards to thinking about the statement 4 lives taken. That would be Kaylee, Xana, Ethan, and of course Maddie. Who would be the survivor? We've seen Bethany, and no, she's not speaking, and she is not wanting to even meet with the defense and potentially never even come back to the state for trial. She's fighting all of that, which is, I guess, at a young age like that, that's her right. And then you got Dylan, stuck in the whole mess, thrown under the bus by law enforcement within their PCA as the surviving witness that potentially saw the intruder and culprit of the homicides leaving the home. Not enough of a statement to actually bring the truth out of who it was. Just small details written within a PCA to get an arrest warrant. You know, the arrest warrant based on bushy eyebrows and clad in black. Yeah, all that makes sense, let me tell you. But it's the 8 hours you legitimately have to think about. If there was potentially outside of those 2 known surviving roommates, were there others in the home?
Whoops, Hans.
I mean, by the sounds of it, one being taken to the hospital, which was the first initial breaking news, that would mean there was another person still alive enough to be rushed to a hospital. Did that person survive once making it to the hospital and hopefully getting treatment? Who knows? It's not as if law enforcement's going to open that door and be transparent or honest about it. They're going to keep that hidden, deemed informants. All they've done is give information that was utilized within an investigation. They're not a person that will take the stand in most cases. Now, there are other cases they will, but in an instant like this, there's a big difference between a confidential informant that gave information to get to an arrest compared to an actual witness to the crime. A witness will testify because they have an actual visual or knowledge of what happened that is not considered to be hearsay. It's direct evidence that they can testify to. And they will be cross-examined. You cannot be a witness just for the prosecution and not be cross-examined by the defense. So the question is, with all the maneuvering and the sealing and everything going on, is there potentially more on the side of a witness that we just don't know about? Meaning that the intruder actually attacked 5 people, not 4, in that short period of time. So where was this survivor? You know, we've discussed the running girl from the home around 2 a.m. Could that have been a potential survivor? Could the attack on a surviving witness actually have happened just prior to the other 4 losing their lives? Is that maybe why Kaylee and Maddie were speed dialing their phone time and time again to get the closest living boyfriend to answer his phone and maybe come help? Maybe they heard that attack happen and let that slip. Because that's just a very odd thing to report on if it wasn't true.
The first one is this one about Kaylee in her bed and hearing something to make her come out and lead Murphy makes the most sense to me. And I thought it was interesting because we know that they were in the same bed when they were found because there was that new information that was given out by the Gonzalez in the latest interview. However, what's interesting about saying that is if we think back to Josco, who I think a lot of us don't feel that was, we've all kind of agreed, you agreed, Gia, that you didn't think it was BK's voice, and we analyzed Josco. That was that guy in the laptop.
Mhm.
He did say in that theory when he was giving his take on where the investigative theory was with law enforcement, he said that Kaylee was, or he inferred that Kaylee was tossed back onto the bed. So that would explain also, if they weren't sleeping in the same bed, why they might have been both found in the same bed.
The only thing I remember about that is that saying that because I think it was Kaylee had already moved out, right, and came back, that there was nothing in her room, that the room was empty, and that other than Murphy being in there. So, do you remember that?
Well, that was a big debate for a while. They, in the latest interview, they actually did clear that up, and they said she had only moved a few things out. And the first thing that the only thing we could remember that said that she wouldn't have moved out was somebody said they were needed to come back to get Murphy's crate the following weekend. So we all thought there might have been stuff in there. And then Lana brought out that picture showing that Kaylee's room still had all that stuff. And remember that we were trying to figure out if that was Kaylee's room that when we analyzed that photo way back.
I didn't know if it was from that night though. So anyway.
Yeah, no, we didn't. That was kind of the point, is we were all kind of like, okay, is this Kaylee's room? Wanted to confirm who was that night. And as far as we knew, it was that night in Kaylee's room. But her mother did say she had only moved a few things out, to the point where one of the things they got back was her waste bin, and it was still full of trash. So
they didn't even process it.
That she didn't think so. I mean,
well, they obviously know that. Yeah.
Yeah. So that was the first thing. And then the other thing, and I have the video, I will play it because I archived it because I knew it was going to get taken off. It was going to get scrubbed down. But when he talks about the running girl at 2 a.m., that's really interesting.
Found out my remote photography group has video from a tripod that was stationed behind the house. It recorded from 8 p.m. to 8 a.m. and shows a woman running from the side of the house as a truck entered the driveway. She ran away from the house and right by our tripod at approximately almost, but not completely accurate or exact, roughly 2 a.m. A group member removed the tripod, and I don't know who has the video. It is the group's right to not disclose why we record, but we would send in recordings in special circumstances. Okay, this is so messed up, I don't even know where to begin, but it continues. So another person writes, then call the LE and give them your information, which sounds like a no-brainer. Why wouldn't they have done that? Unless they were afraid of turning it in. And then it continues. Another poster writes, quote, group member reported the video was sent to Idaho State Police. Our group has been removed from FB for various policy violations, end quote. And then that's all I have. The group didn't follow up on this conversation.
It does give that has always been baffling to me, how that one anomaly that night, the 2 a.m. running girl that was captured on camera, how we never heard anything beyond that. We heard a couple posts on Facebook, but so I thought that was really interesting that he brought that up too.
Yeah, definitely.
And all right, well, I'll play the rest of this. Here we go.
But you could also put a spin on that. You could really put a spin on that. Could the surviving witness actually not be somebody connected to the home in itself, like friends of the victims or even friends that hung out with the survivors, or just even a part of the crime itself as a perpetrator? as a second assailant. They got injured. I mean, if you really think about that, wouldn't that be a crazy twist to this whole story? Because I know the defense is screaming, who else was arrested? Who is a co-defendant? What a crazy twist, right? The co-defendant could possibly be the survivor taken to the hospital. That just seemed. And why did it slip at the beginning? And now it's silenced. Who was that?
Mm-hmm. And those like
need to be answered.
boys all walking in front of the car.
Hopefully one day we get them, ladies and gentlemen. Hopefully one day.
Oh yeah. So there's the boys walking behind the car, and then the latest thing, what I did in my live stream, the last live stream I did, we watched like 2 or 3 videos with Rolo, because he says that he can see, and he puts on different filters, but he can see different things that he feels that either have been scrubbed out of the video or that just aren't really visible unless you know how to look. But there's guys hiding in the bushes. Whatever's Jonathan Lee Richards' channel, and we went and we got like the unedited body cam footage, and we were looking in the bushes. I mean, we must have been doing it for 45 minutes on the live stream, but it is really interesting. This case has given me so many migraines.
I just said I agree. And going down rabbit holes, it's the truth. But it's kind of all we have right now, because right now we're just sort of in a stage of a lot of reflecting and reacting and just kind of waiting in anticipation.
I wanted to bring up this one. So Yvonne says, I don't feel that her room was empty. You can see the computer on her bed in the picture and the comforter, and then it says computer monitor is what she wanted to say.
Right. Yeah. They just at one point they said it was empty. She had moved out, and then as you're saying, they came back and corrected that, and the Gonzalez said no. She took only a couple of things. She still had most of her stuff.
Yeah. So what I was the other thing too is when we look at that, and I'll show a picture. I've done a few videos on it, and if I edit this and make it a video, I'll show a picture of it. But Fox News had reported, it was actually reported on originally by the Daily Mail. They took some pictures initially of the crime scene, and one of the things that you could see from one of the windows that didn't have window dressing was Kaylee's computer screen, the computer monitor, and they had taken the actual hard drive to the computer for evidence, and then you could see the computer screen. So there was that computer as well, like not even her laptop, just like a regular computer. So that at least hadn't been moved out. And then there was one other thing I had for comments that we didn't discuss yet, which was this one from April, where she says, I think there might have been a hostage type situation and a survivor. Maybe the survivor is one of the 4 and they're letting the public think that they're dead for protection, if not a 5th person. Oh gosh. That's something. And then the other thing AR just said, which I hadn't occurred to me before, is this whole co-defendant thing. If there is a 5th, could that survivor be someone with like more, mutual combat injuries? And is
he saying there's 7 people then? So there's Dylan and Bethany, and then a 3rd survivor that we don't know about?
Yeah, that was an initial. There was like an initial reporting where they said 4 had passed away and 1 had been rushed to the hospital. And Unfiltered Lucky had recalled hearing that, and some people had also. So he actually reached out to the reporter and verified the story. It was the initial story that they had been reported to, and they reported. So now everybody's speculating on exactly what that verbiage meant. So here we are.
Right. I don't know.
So
I feel like we'd hear more about that, right? If that was the case, like. We certainly hear about Dylan and Bethany. So, like, why wouldn't we hear about another person?
Oh, yeah.
I think we would, especially if they were in the hospital and taken away by ambulance. Like, maybe it was that they thought one of the 4 might have been, able to, might have survived. Maybe they thought there was a reason to take an ambulance. I don't know, but I think that would have come out because it was like
Agreed.
so many hours after the, you know, before anyone got there.
Yeah, I mean, I don't see how that could not, those details could be left out.
Right.
But we don't know what we don't know, and everything is sealed. So I can see where people go to thinking that, and I think it's fascinating too that a reporter got that from somewhere, somebody who's in the media, and they're reporting a story to their corp. You know, I just can't imagine them getting a detail like that incorrect.
Right.
And then,
No, and there were a lot more details at the time because we weren't under seal. And, you know, I think too, we went under seal so quickly. And now when they make a motion to seal anything, it's like granted so quickly in this case. So they're really trying to keep everything under wraps till we can get to the trial.
oh, totally. And after you look for people for a while, you see them. Oh, I don't think that's intended for us. But this one, 2 people went to the hospital. You know, Yvonne, if you can remember which creator or where you heard that from, drop it in the chat. We'd love to know.